Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me. You have 1 minute to clean up. That's what my brother said before firing me right there in front of every executive who used to call me their backbone. My throat burned. My hands shook, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of watching me break. I just said thank you and walked out. Seconds later, 10 engineers, my team, my people stood up one by one and silently followed me to the door. He laughed, thinking it was over. But when the legal director turned pale and screamed, "Call a lawyer!" Now I knew that was the exact moment everything shifted. Before I share my story, I'd love to know you are here with me and listening to me. Comment hi below or tell me where you're from. I love hearing how far my story reach. Sometimes knowing someone is there makes all the difference. Thank you. And now let me tell you everything. If this story already caught your heart, please hit subscribe and stay with me. My name is Evan Cole Martin, the man who lost everything in 1 minute and took it all back in 16 days. Monday morning, 18th floor, glass walls, catching the pale Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania sun over Strip District. The LED board on the far wall pulsed out our run rate and uptime. On the Akron line map blinking green while a thick contract for the Cleveland plant waited at the center of the table like a loaded question. We were minutes to demo investors already on their way. I was running my HSOP checklist under my breath. Go slow to go far when my brother stepped forward and cut the room in half with a single sentence. You have 1 minute to clean up. I kept my pen above the page a beat longer, long enough to make sure I'd heard what I knew I'd heard. You're terminating all of my operational authority effective immediately. He smiled without warmth and nodded. Around him, executives shifted in their seats and looked at me. The way people look at an obstacle, they're relieved someone else is moving. I capped my pen, slid 2 yellow Post-its into my notebook. K Appendix HSM UCC1 closed the cover and stood. Thank you. I said, not loud, not meek, just final. Chairs creaked. Nobody breathed. I turned for the door. The first sound after the latch of my notebook was a small plastic clack as a badge touched wood. Then another, then 8 more. 10 engineers my team. My people rose in sequence, placed their security cards in a neat fan on the corner, and fell in behind me without a word. My brother laughed too loud for the room. I can hire a new team in a week. The elevator bell dinged. I pressed the button. Behind me, Megan Sloan Walker, our general counsel, was already scrolling the contract vault on her tablet. I didn't have to turn to know the exact moment her finger stopped. Appendix K. Reversion on interference. Her chair scraped tile. Her voice hit the glass. Call a lawyer. Now the bell chimed again. The doors slid open and I stepped inside to the clean, humming silence only an elevator can make. In the lobby, I crossed the marble to the windows and let the Monongahela River's gray current level my pulse. In my pocket, the metal edge of the collocation locker key pressed against my palm, and the USB HSM token knocked lightly against it with each step. 1 minute, I told myself, had just given me back all the time I needed. The plan didn't start as a trap. It started under fluorescent lights at 1:30 a.m., with burned coffee and the hum of the Akron test rig breathing in my ears. 2 years earlier, R&D was about to be starved, so a quarter looked prettier. Speed over safety, flash over steel. I redrew the modular safety architecture from the ground up, separated the licensing brain from the body, and moved the pulse of it outside the company's reach. I formed Stoneforge Holdings LLC in Pennsylvania to hold the patents on the interlock libraries and the control modules to own the firmware, the compile chain, the safety PLC libraries, the living code of the platform. Then I wrote Appendix K. If funding is suspended or management interferes with safety standards or oversight, all license rights and exploitation revert to the original architect Stoneforge. Simple words, hard steel. I filed UCC-1 statements to perfect a security interest in the intangible asset source firmware images safety configurations so no one could pretend later they hadn't seen the chain of title. The key server, the only device that could sign and bless a module to run, lived inside a hardware security module in a quiet collocation rack across the river in Homestead, Pennsylvania. AIC remained the integrator under the MSA, but the heartbeat was mine. The crack with my brother widened in days, not months. He wanted the safety checklist shortened to hit the press event. I told him, no one flips a line live before every interlock proves itself. He said, you just like making things hard. Business needs speed. I said, no one gets to turn a factory into a coin toss. After that, every meeting came with a weight you could taste. I sketched a map for myself, 3 transparent layers taped over each other on the drafting table. Ownership Stoneforge license, HSM integration AIC. Pull anyone, and the image collapses. I sent the UCC-1 acknowledgments by email with HR Legal and Finance CCD flagged high priority. People skimmed, replied received, and went back to talking about margins. We signed a new MSA for the Cleveland plant, and my brother forced the word consolidate into the room bundle the licenses. He said push 1 packet so acceptance goes faster. I agreed to consolidate the pipe, not the well. The document spells it out. Aggregation is a distribution convenience. Title control and revocation remain with Stoneforge. He held a thicker cable in his hand and thought he owned the current. In truth, he only stood on top of the conduit I controlled. I didn't build Stoneforge to punish blood. I built it because every time someone tries to bargain away a worker's safety to win a headline, somebody gets hurt who never sat at this table. The interlocks, the audits, the keys. These weren't obstacles to speed. They were the reason anyone could sleep after pressing start. I wrote Appendix K and filed the UCC-1s so the words no one reads would have the teeth everyone respects. If nobody else would take the fine print seriously, I would turn the fine print into a steel door. So when the cuts came, and the edicts followed, and the room today filled with people who believe titles outrank physics, the lock I turned 2 years ago held. The key was in my pocket. The server's heartbeat drummed quietly in Homestead, Pennsylvania, and the river kept moving east. I walked out with 10 engineers because they knew what I knew. A platform that can be bullied isn't a platform. It's a prop. My brother believes he ended something in 1 minute. What he ended was the illusion that he was the one holding the door. The old warehouse near Strip District Market still smelled like oil and dust, a space long forgotten by the city but perfect for what we needed. A place to think, to plan, and to build without noise from the outside world. I rented it under Stoneforge name. No signage, just a small plate on the steel door that read Unit 9. The 10 engineers who followed me out that morning showed up before sunrise still wearing their AIC badges clipped to their belts out of habit. When the lights flickered on, our reflections stretched across the bare, concrete, 10 faces that had chosen conviction over comfort. We split into 3 groups without needing a meeting. The technical wing took over the workbenches, unpacked old laptops, reconfigured the license server from backup modules, and rerouted access paths for clients who had valid MSA contracts with transition clauses. The legal team, really just 2 people with law degrees and too much caffeine, drafted the notice of license termination addressed to AIC interference and failure of good faith funding the 2 phrases that would bury my brother's argument before it started. They also prepared assurance letters to the factory partners promising that Stoneforge would keep their systems running. The market group built a spreadsheet of every plant dependent on the platform, Akron, Cleveland, Erie, arranging quiet meetings with operations directors who just wanted their machines to stay alive. I watched them work equal parts pride and unease. The bigger picture haunted me, hundreds of factory workers' paychecks tied to the belts and sensors I had designed. If the lines stopped, their wages would vanish. I wasn't going to let that happen. I set up a short-term internal credit fund through Stone Forge. Small, but enough to keep their hourly payroll until we secured the new licenses. To me, protecting them mattered more than punishing anyone. Revenge doesn't build a future. Integrity does. That night, I gathered everyone around the folding table under the hum of a cheap neon light. "We're not here to destroy," I said quietly. "We're here to keep the technology alive the right way." Heads nodded around the table. We laid out the core rule. No company would ever use our safety library without agreeing to an independent audit. Every line of code would answer to a set of hands that understood what it protected. It was past midnight when my laptop blinked with a new email. No subject line, no text, just an attachment. I hovered my cursor over the file before opening it. Inside was a system log time-stamped earlier that evening showing a senior AIC manager had attempted to bridge the hardware security module with a fake demo key. The last line of the file read, "Don't let them use the stripped version for the investor demo. It's not lawful." The sender's address was masked, but the IP trace was unmistakable. It came from a workstation inside AIC's legal division. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. There were only two people who had access to that subnet, Megan Sloan Walker, or one of her junior counsels. Either she was signaling me, or someone in her circle was trying to warn me anonymously. I wasn't sure which possibility carried more weight, the idea that Megan was quietly refusing to play along, or that she was trapped in a machine starting to eat itself. The question was what to do with it. Should I send a public warning to the board to document that Brandon knew exactly what he was about to do that would safeguard my position, but might expose the source who risked sending me proof? Or should I stay silent, let them trigger the failure, and let their own arrogance speak louder than I ever could? The choice lingered like a coin in midair. I chose silence, but not passivity. That night I updated the digital signature chain on the license server. Any attempt to boot a demo with a counterfeit key would activate a legal overlay across every interface. Unauthorized execution. All rights reserved to Stone Forge Holdings, LLC under UCC1 filing PA8834. In other words, the next time they tried to fake functionality, the system would simply become a mirror reflecting their lie. By 2:45 a.m., everyone had gone home except me. I stood in the middle of the warehouse, the neon light throwing a faint green hue over the concrete, and stared at the laptop screen. Tomorrow, when they pressed the button, the system would answer for me. I didn't need to send threats. The code already knew what to say. I whispered to myself, and if anyone asks why, I'll read them their own words. 8 days after the firing, AIC opened its gates for the Grand Investor demo at the Akron facility. Japanese investors filled the front row cameras, waiting notepads balanced on knees. The giant screen behind the stage shimmered with the AIC logo in silver. My brother, Brandon Vale Martin, stood center stage, every hair in place, voice confident and rehearsed. Today, he declared, "We prove that our platform can run independently of any one individual." The audience clapped politely. Somewhere across the river, I sat in my apartment, coffee cooling by the window, watching through a private live stream feed my former team had kept open for me. The first engineer on site initiated the launch sequence. The progress bar crawled to 80%, paused, then froze. On the massive screen, one sentence appeared in clean gray letters. License authorization expired. A silence spread through the room like fog. Brandon's laugh came out too quick. "A temporary glitch," he said, forcing cheer. "Give us 3 minutes." 3 minutes turned into 12. 12 into 25. Every conveyor belt, every robotic arm, every sensor froze in place. The hum of the plant died, replaced by the soft panic of shoes shifting and murmurs rising. In the control room, technicians scrambled, plugging in drives, checking backups. They didn't know the HSM key lived miles away in Pennsylvania inside a locked cage at the collocation I paid for in cash. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the flickering live stream as messages from my team lit up my phone. Mia wrote, "They're trying a dummy key. No access." Jake added, "Ops can't even open the staging shell." My coffee had gone cold, but the satisfaction that crept up my spine was warm and steady. Then, over the commotion, a voice cut through the noise. Megan stood from the legal section tablet in hand, her tone sharp enough to slice the air. "If the license has reverted to Stoneforge, we are not authorized to restart the system," she said clearly. Heads turned toward her, then toward Brandon. You could feel the collective realization crawl across the room. Brandon's smile wavered. "She's mistaken," he said quickly. "We have a consolidation agreement. Everything's fine." He motioned to the engineers. "Run the backup environment." The operator pressed the keys again. A new message filled the screen. "License revoked due to breach of funding clause." I could almost hear the gasps through the live stream. That clause was mine. The one stating that if management ever cut safety funding or interfered with compliance oversight, all rights reverted to the original architect. Brandon had pulled the trigger himself without realizing it. Inside the Akron plant, panic rippled outward. Some investors stood muttering to their translators. Others took notes. Erin, the operations director, raised her voice. "Are we saying we've lost control of the platform?" Her question landed like a siren. Cameras caught Brandon's face tight in color, draining as he adjusted his cufflinks. "Of course not," he insisted, his voice rising half a pitch. "We have redundancies." But his words trembled at the edges, and the tremor spread faster than any fault line. By the afternoon, the demo footage had leaked. Someone, probably one of the engineers, uploaded it to the internal AIC network, and within hours, every employee had watched their CEO's showcase collapse into an error message. The press picked it up by evening. Headlines rolled across every business feed. Family Empire freezes mid-demo. CEO's platform fails license test. The stock analysts circled like sharks, calling it a catastrophic governance lapse. I sat in my apartment with the blinds half open, the soft gray light of the river filtering through. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just watched the feed hands folded, breathing steady. "You can't threaten truth," I said softly. It has its own way of speaking. The code had done exactly what it was built to do. Protect itself from hands that didn't belong. But I knew Brandon. He wouldn't stop here. He'd burn through every favor, every connection to rebuild control, even if it meant setting the whole company on fire. I shut the laptop, letting the city hum fill the silence. The Monongahela River outside moved dark and endless, just like the night 2 years ago when I decided to lock the door from the inside. The difference now was that the world had finally noticed who held the key. 2 days after the demo collapsed, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen since the morning I walked out. The caller ID flashed AIC Human Resources. I almost ignored it, but curiosity, that old and dangerous thing, won. Lauren Parker's voice came through, smooth, rehearsed, just a shade too cheerful. "Evan, hi," she began. "We've been talking internally, and leadership would like to invite you back as a temporary technical advisor, just to stabilize things." Her tone was dipped in honey, but her words were wrapped in wires. I could hear another voice faintly in the background, a deeper one, impatient. Probably Brandon, standing close enough to supervise her script. I knew what this was. They weren't offering redemption. They were buying silence. Lauren pressed on. "No one understands the system like you do. You could help us get through this transition. Of course, compensation is flexible." I let the pause stretch long enough for her to grow nervous. "Would I have full technical control?" I asked, an authority over safety compliance and design standards. There was a flicker of paper rustling on her end. "Well," she hesitated. "Those decisions would still need alignment with the CEO." I almost smiled. "Lauren," I said, voice steady. Tell my brother there isn't enough money in that company to buy back the nights I didn't sleep or the conscience I refused to sell. Then I hung up. No anger, no drama, just the clean sound of finality. 15 minutes later, my phone started vibrating nonstop. My old engineers were forwarding HR emails one after another, termination notices citing contract breaches and non-compete violations. They were trying to scare the team into isolation. But by evening, Megan had intervened from the legal department. She sent an internal memo declaring every one of those contracts void due to lack of board authorization. It was the quietest mutiny I'd ever witnessed. That night, another email came in. The sender's name, Mark Daniels, Harbor Dynamics. The subject line read simply, "When you're ready to talk, call me." I printed it out and slid it into a black folder labeled Contingency B. I wasn't ready to make deals yet, not with anyone. At midnight, my phone rang again, this time from an unlisted number. A woman's voice whispered, "You haven't heard, have you? They're rebuilding the system with a fake code base." The voice was low, but familiar. "Megan?" I asked. Silence. Then the line cut off. Moments later, a single text appeared. "I'm not helping you. I just don't want to go down with them." I set the phone face down on the table and stared out the window. Across the river, the AIC tower glowed like a beacon of denial, its glass reflecting in the Monongahela's dark water. I opened my notebook and wrote one line. When people choose to bury the truth, they start digging their own grave. All I have to do is wait for them to fall in. Day 12. AIC announced in every major paper that their platform was fully restored. Brandon held a press conference in the main lobby, standing in front of a row of machines humming in what looked like perfect rhythm. "The system is operational again," he declared confidently. "Our team has overcome the challenges." Cameras flashed. The audience clapped. What they didn't know was that every screen behind him was running on a local demo mode, a hollow simulation with no valid license signature. From the Strip District Market Workshop, we watched the feed on a grainy monitor. The engineers stood behind me, arms crossed, silent. They knew the truth. Those machines were dead shells. Without the valid cryptographic handshake from the HSM in Pennsylvania, they could only mimic life for a while. At exactly 9:12 the next morning, the illusion broke. Every line across every plant shut down at once. Conveyor belts froze, mid-motion lights blinked red, and the same message spread like wildfire across thousands of terminals. Unauthorized access. License revoked. On the internal chat channels, panic erupted. Why won't the server respond? Who disabled root access? I didn't have to see the logs to know. Brandon's restoration had triggered the self-protection cascade built into the system, a failsafe I designed years ago to destroy any unauthorized mirror build. His counterfeit patch had burned down what little was left of his credibility. Inside headquarters, Megan delivered a report to the board that morning. All operational rights to the software have legally reverted to Stoneforge Holdings, LLC as of Mr. Evan Cole Martin's termination, she said, reading slowly so the words would sink in. Brandon slammed his hand on the table. "That's not possible. I voided that appendix." "You can't void a clause recorded with a UCC-1 filing," Megan replied calmly. "And you certainly can't forge one. You've already breached federal intellectual property law." The room fell quiet. For the first time, even the board's most loyal directors looked uncertain. Investors began canceling their calls. That afternoon, I received an encrypted message from one of the board's financial officers, a request to discuss repurchasing the license directly from Stoneforge. I declined. I told them any negotiation would have to be formal in writing with every director's signature. No side channels, no secrets. It forced them to admit in official record that Brandon had acted outside his authority. Later that night, my phone rang again. Brandon's voice came through raw, cracked at the edges. "You're killing this family, Evan. I let the silence breathe before answering. I'm stopping you before you kill more than a company. He didn't reply, just the hollow click of a line gone dead. 2 hours later, Jake forwarded me a message from an AIC systems administrator. Brandon had ordered a full purge of all local data mirrors, his last attempt to corner me into unlocking the real server. But what he didn't know was that the mirrors he was deleting were nothing but ghost images. The live heartbeat of the code had never left the collocation vault in Pennsylvania. He was erasing smoke, not fire. By dawn, a new email arrived, this one from Megan herself. Board requests your presence at an emergency session, 8:30 a.m. tomorrow. I read it twice, then typed my reply. I'll be there, but not to negotiate. The night before the meeting, I opened my black briefcase and arranged the documents neatly. The original contract, the certified UCC-1 filings, the legal opinion from counsel, and the server log showing every unauthorized access Brandon had ordered. Evidence stacked like steel. The city outside my window was still asleep. I stood before the mirror, buttoned my shirt, tightened the tie knot, and whispered to my reflection. He gave me 1 minute to clear the table. Tomorrow it's his turn. Then I closed the case, turned off the light, and waited for morning. On the 13th morning after the firing, I walked back into the 18th floor room where it all began, a black case in my hand and a corridor of quiet eyes following me in. People looked away as if the carpet had suddenly become fascinating. Brandon stood at the window, washed out by hard daylight, tie-loose skin the color of paper left in the rain. Robert Lang from the Boston Fund took the center seat at the table. The rest of the board fanned around him. Megan sat left of Robert with a thick file, her gaze level, unreadable. Brandon spoke first, trying to catch a tone he used to own. "We can resolve this internally," he said. "I want my brother to remember this company is family property." I set the case on the table, clicked it open, and met his eyes. "I didn't come to talk about family," I said. "I came to close a legal matter." I slid the first document across to Robert. Appendix K reversion on interference. I said, bearing Mr. Brandon Vale. Martin's signature and AIC's corporate seal. He read, nodded once, passed it to his right. Next, I placed a certified copy on the polished wood. UCC-1 filings recorded in Pennsylvania, perfecting a security interest in the software and libraries. I kept my voice calm, factual. Under federal and state law, interference occurred when management cut safety funding and directed unauthorized modifications. At that moment, license rights reverted to Stoneforge Holdings, LLC. I've acted exactly within the scope the clause describes. A director at the far end leaned forward. "So you're claiming you control the company's entire platform?" "No," I said, steady. "I control the part that breathes the husk you can keep." Robert turned to my brother. "Were you aware of this claw?" Brandon's jaw flexed. "It was procedural," he snapped. "I had it voided." Megan's chair slid back a fraction. "It wasn't voided," she said evenly. "You sent a copy with a missing certification page to a clerk. The original remains in effect." She laid 2 pages side by side, one with a blue wet stamp and signatures, one a flat black scan. "This is what you filed. This is the real one." The room went still. Robert's voice thinned. "You altered a legal document." Sweat stood on Brandon's upper lip. "I was trying to keep the company from bleeding out," he said, the confidence gone thin as tissue. I turned my laptop to face the board and cast the system log on the wall. Timestamps crawled down the screen next to a familiar credential hash. "These entries show when the CEO ordered deletion of the local mirrors," I explained. "No one forced him to rip out the oxygen. He did that when he forgot technology isn't a prop. It's a living system with safeguards he never bothered to learn." One director slammed his palm on the table. "Enough. He can't remain in charge." Robert Lang raised a hand but didn't disagree. Then Robert faced me. Evan, would you consider returning as CTO? We could also consider you for CEO. The offer hovered over the table, heavy and late. I took in the room the eyes that slid past mine a week ago, the hands that signed what they never read. I'm not coming back to a place that waits for someone else to fix what it breaks. I said, I have my own company. I'm going to protect this platform another way. Silence folded over the room. Even the HVAC seemed to hold its breath. I reached into the case and placed a crisp letter in front of Robert. This is an executed acceptance to sell usage rights to the Martin Modular platform to Harbor Dynamics. I said the consideration is $1.2 billion. His eyebrows lifted as he scanned the terms. There's a draft countersignature. I added, if AIC wants to remain in the ecosystem, you can, but only as an integrator under Stoneforge license and under one condition. And he never touches it again. I nodded toward Brandon. The light from the window cut a pale blade across his cheek. He sank into his chair as if the cushions had turned to stone. I closed the case and stood. You gave me 1 minute to clear my desk. I said to him, now you have 1 minute to decide what's left after you set fire to everything. The latch clicked, the door swung, and the wind in the hallway made a low sound like a curtain falling on the last act of a play no one wanted to watch twice. On the 16th morning, I walked onto a brushed steel stage at Harbor Dynamics in Cleveland. The backdrop was slate silver, clean as a scalpel. Cameras waited. Mark Daniels nodded to me over the contract laid open on the table. I picked up the pen signed Evan Cole Martin, Chief Advisory Architect, and felt something settle inside my chest, a weight I'd carried for years, finally setting down. The papers weren't just numbers. They were proof that preparation outlives bravado. We had added 2 clauses that mattered more to me than the price. Stoneforge would retain oversight for ethical compliance, and Harbor Dynamics would never deploy the platform for military uses or civilian surveillance. Mark read the lines again and smiled. I knew you'd insist on this, he said. It's exactly why we wanted you. I nodded. I'm not selling technology, I told him. I'm entrusting it to people who understand what it protects. While pens scratched and cameras clicked, the news feeds lit up. AIC stock was in free fall, down 68% before lunch. The board suspended Brandon and retained outside counsel. The headlines wrote themselves. The CEO who didn't read the fine print. I stared at the crawl on the monitor and felt no triumph, only quiet. Some endings don't need celebration. They only need to be true. In the afternoon, Megan arrived at the Harbor Dynamics lobby with a simple question folded inside a courtesy visit. They're going to ask why I didn't raise the alarm sooner, she said as we stood near a window looking out at Euclid Avenue. I'm going to tell them I waited until you were ready to be heard. I met her eyes. I never needed anyone on my side, I said. But I'm grateful you didn't bury what mattered. She nodded a small curve of the mouth that looked like relief, then left without asking for anything. By evening, the 10 engineers from Strip District Market filed into a conference room where a fresh org chart hung on a white wall, Stoneforge Harbor Division. They signed their names beneath new titles, same hands, same minds, a better promise. I watched each signature land and thought of the morning. They stood up one by one and placed their badges on a table like an oath. That minute had stretched longer than any of us expected, but it ended exactly when it needed to. Under a thicket of microphones and lights, I gave a short statement because the moment asked for clarity, not theater. 8 years ago, I said I believed good work was enough to earn respect. I was wrong. Respect isn't granted. It's defended in clauses in law and in the way you carry yourself when no one's clapping. I took a breath and finished it the only honest way I knew. I don't regret being fired. When they said, "You have 1 minute to clean up," they handed me a power they never understood. A reporter called out from the second row, "Do you have anything to say to your brother?" The room stilled. I thought of 100 conversations we'd never had, and one sentence I owed him anyway. Yes, I said, letting the word land. Tell him I said, thank you. The flash of bulbs was a sudden storm. Applause followed, not wild, not staged, just real. I left the building as the sun dropped behind the Lowhead Dam and drove west toward Pittsburgh. The Fort Pitt Bridge rose ahead, a ribcage of steel holding the night apart. Same bridge where a humming hardware module kept a promise I made to myself when this all began. The river ran dark under the trusses, the water carrying its quiet history forward. I thought about the machines we'd built, the people who stood beside them, and the thin line between a tool and a weapon. Technology can change a city. Without ethics, it's just expensive wire. I killed the radio and let the road talk to me, tires stitching a rhythm into the asphalt. The skyline slid into view, familiar and new at once. He gave me 1 minute. That was all it took to prove who really built the empire and who only borrowed the light. Here's what I carry now. That the dust has settled. Power isn't volume. It's alignment. It's the quiet moment when your values, your preparation, and your courage finally lock into place and refuse to move. I spent years believing that excellence alone would protect me. That if the code ran clean and the numbers sang, the room would do the right thing. It didn't. What protected me in the end were the choices I made when no one was watching, writing the clause. No one wanted to read defending standards. People called inconvenient and trusting a team that chose principle over payroll. If you're standing at your own edge right now, accused of being difficult for asking for safety ethics or clarity, hear me. You're not difficult. You're a bearing wall. Systems stand because people like you refuse to pretend. And if that stand cost you a room, it will hand you a door. Walk through it. If this story found you in a late-night scroll or a lunch break between shifts, I want you to know I see you. I know the way your stomach drops when someone with a title treats your work like a prop, and the way your hands still show up anyway. I know what it is to be told you have 1 minute, and to build a lifetime in that minute. If any part of what I shared held a mirror to your own fight, stay with me here. Say, listening in the comments so I know you're on the other side of this screen. Tell me where you are watching from. I love seeing how far a single voice can travel when it finally speaks without permission. Share one line about the moment you realized your boundaries weren't negotiable. Your words might be the reason someone else decides to hold the line tomorrow. If you want more stories told exactly like this confessional, cinematic, and honest, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. It's free, but it isn't small. It tells the algorithm that grit and integrity matter as much as spectacle. Share this episode with a friend who needs a reminder that no can be the most generous word you say to yourself. And if you want to go deeper, drop your questions below. I read them all, and I'll pull the most urgent ones into the next chapter. Thank you for giving me your minutes today. I won't waste them. Wherever you are, keep your standards, document your truth, build your clauses, and remember when they hand you a countdown. They might be handing you the